So before we really get into this week's episode, I want to say first of all, great episode. It is always awesome to see Walter Koenig as Bester. It was great to see him back. I think I hinted before that he would be back, and well, here he is. It is probably no surprise to you that he is going to be a semi-recurring character, and I think that's awesome because he does an amazing job of his character. Like the very opening scene when he's literally torturing the information out of the gentleman, and then he says, "I caught it," and he happens to have his hand just like this. "I caught it, and I got it betrayed by his final thing." The hand motions and the way he does his voice are just really well done and perfectly in sync with the kind of character Bester is. I'm not going to talk about Bester too much today. I do want to say one thing about Bester really quick. After this episode and the previous episodes we've seen him in, I think it's safe to say my interpretation of Bester, in summary, we'll talk about more about Bester when he takes more of a front show, when he has more of an episode to himself later on. I find Bester interesting because he is both civil and not. He is interested in security, in law, order, but he is also interested in power. In other words, Bester is actually what I like to think of as a well-written villain. He is definitely a villain, he's definitely evil, but he is self-interested without being self-obsessed. Too many times in fiction, and let's be completely blunt, in real life too, someone who is evil, someone who is self-interested, usually is self-interested to the point of self-obsession. To the point where they will gleefully ignore benefit towards others because they only care about benefit towards themselves, right? To me personally, a more interesting villain has always been someone who will actually try to improve the surroundings around them, and actually willing to help others, in addition to the fact that they primarily care about themselves. I've talked about this concept many times. It's the idea. It's one step away from the smart villain, aka someone who says, "I want the world to be a better place, because I want a better place to rule." They are still self-interested. They are still villainous. They are still willing to do horrible things to accomplish their goals, but they are also interested in changing and moving and working with others in order to accomplish that, as opposed to the diametric opposite of that perspective, which is Darth Malik. Not that I am accusing Darth Malik of being poorly written, by the way, as I think I made clear during my KOTOR lore run. He's actually very well written. It's just he is... This episode also really brought to mind two more things, regardless of the episode, or should I say irregardless and drive people crazy, of the episode I wanted to talk about. I'm going to save those for later, but I just wanted to mentally remind myself there. So, the beginning of this episode starts off with something that seems kind of like a joke. The fact that they have to pay 30 credits a week in order to rent their apartments from the people who are employing them. Now that is certainly a joke, and maybe I'm just an incredibly jaded bastard who's been through corporate America too many times, but I wonder how many of my viewers can sympathize with the idea of working for a place and really pouring out your heart and your soul and your health and your time into a job, burning yourself out doing your job, and not only do you not get an attaboy or any kind of positive reinforcement, you get negative reinforcement. And, you are told the equivalent of having to rent your own room in your job. How many of you out there have been through that in your lives? I'll go and raise my hand on this one. Yeah. It's actually interesting to me. I've talked many times about the economics of Babylon 5. It's something Babylon 5 does pretty well, actually, over the course of the series. And while I certainly sympathize with the fact that you do, have to accommodate for the fact that this station has to be paid for, which is one of the major reasons why it is such a trade hub, you also have to understand that there is such a thing as penny pinching. I'm going to relate a story to you really quick. This is third-hand information, so I can't vouch for its validity, but I have no reason to disbelieve it. In fact, I do, believe this is a true story. There was a company that was getting a consultant to show up and try to really squinch down on the budget, to trim the fat, okay? So they decided, in preparation for this consultant showing up, I may be getting some of the details wrong here. Forgive me. This was in the 90s. In preparation for this consultant showing up, the people in charge there decided we're going to go ahead and start limiting how much toilet paper we have available in the restrooms to cut back on budget. Now, anyone with a brain could probably tell you that's ridiculous. But what ended up happening was the consultant showed up and informed them that, and like the first thing this consultant did was went and checked the bathrooms, and they were very confused by this. And the consultant related the fact that one of the first things they check is for the little stuff, because any company that's already starting to squinch, penny pinch on the little stuff is probably already tanking. The company in question later went under. Yeah. That's what I think of when I think of this 30 credits a week thing. It's like, really? Especially, now, we don't have a huge amount of understanding of how many credits is how much in this show. They give a few numbers here and there. But it's pretty well emphasized that 30 credits a week is a joke. Especially on a military budget. But anyways, moving on. I have a note here that literally just says, Bester is amazing. I hate to just flat out gush. But seriously, Bester's amazing. He is such an awesome character. He is such an awesome villain. I actually don't want to talk about this yet, but he forms the trifecta of he is one of three characters that I feel best summarize the villainy of this show. In a good way. I mean, these three are like the three... each one of them covers a certain thematic core of a different type of villainy, and he is one of them. And I've already kind of discussed a little bit of that. And again, I'll talk more about him in a future episode. But yeah, I like how I can't remember their names all of a sudden. Bruce Broxleitner and the woman who plays Delenn have a sort of different chemistry than I usually see actors have. I've talked many times about chemistry amongst actors and amongst characters, and it's a weird chemistry between the two of them. I talked before how Ivanova and Sheridan have an odd chemistry, even if the actors don't really. But in this case, the chemistry between the actress who plays Delenn and Bruce Broxleitner, who plays Sheridan, is sort of mutually self-reaffirming. Like, both of them have a weird sort of chemistry where they bounce off of each other well, but they don't gel well, but they still are good together on screen because of that bounce back between the two of them and between their personalities and between the way they act and the way they present themselves. It's kind of hard to describe. I imagine some of you know what I mean by this. And I wonder a little bit if the writing sort of took a different direction as a result of that chemistry. It wouldn't be the first time in a television show where two actors had really good chemistry and the writers decided to take that and run with it. I also really like the idea that what really gets Sheridan's attention, what really makes him consider her offer for dinner and say, yes, I want to do this, is the fact that she doesn't want us to discuss business. This has actually been a little bit of a side plot to Sheridan's character arc ever since his sister showed up, where his sister shows up and they talk, and she interrupts him and says something that I've heard from my sister all the time. All you're talking about is work. Work is basically my life right now, so my friends and family get a little tired of hearing about it, because it's all I have to talk about. Not a complaint, it's just true. But, so, you know, he's had this sort of struggling to be a person problem that's been sort of a subplot through most of the episodes where he's featured as a major character up to this point. Or at least episodes where he's had some character growth and characterization. And you can tell that he's still someone, you know, he's still struggling with the loss of his wife. He's still struggling with being a military, you know, career military man. He's someone who is basically, I just realized I'm kind of describing myself here. He's absorbed in his work. And the person under that who really wants to, you know, not have to worry about that stuff hasn't really had a lot of chance to express himself. And then we see two elements of that in this episode. One is his interactions with Ivanova, where he's just telling her random jokes. And and we see how much of a goofball he actually is underneath the, you know, the hardline commander. And then in his interactions with Delenn at dinner, where he obviously just wants to be a person with her rather than the captain around her for a while. And it's some nice character growth, and it's a continuation of an arc that will continue after this point as well. Um, I the fact that so the fact that Franklin is the head of the railroad here is something that was so obvious that I actually caught it even the first time I watched this. All the way back when this episode was first coming out. Ivanova seemed too obvious of a choice, so I didn't suspect her at all. And then it's funny because Garibaldi suspected her too. He's like, "Look, I need to talk to the railroad," and she's like, "Yeah, no, not me. Sorry." But Franklin was such an obvious choice because we've already seen what kind of a man Franklin is. You remember that whole episode with the alien healing device? You remember that? Because one of the big points of that episode was he was running a clinic in the oh shoot, I can't think what they call it, Brown sector, the crap area, off the books, basically stealing from the actual paid hospital in order to pay for their medicine and their treatments. That's the kind of guy Franklin is. He has such a simple perspective. I'm here to heal people. The end. So of course he's going to try and help these people if they reach out to him. And it's funny, they actually referenced that clinic, the off-the-books clinic, in this episode. Nice little bit of a continuity there. What is not a little bit of nice continuity is I've noticed this for several episodes. I feel like they're trying to focus a little bit too much on the drama of Talia Winters. And it's not necessarily a negative, but it does make me kind of tilt my head every time I see it. And this episode is a good example of that, especially the scene where they had to show the whole flashback with Ironheart. Or I don't think I think of his name. The gentleman from the season 1 episode who ascended to a higher plane of existence, and became Wesley Crusher. It's not like I'm disinterested in her as a character. It's not like she's a bad actress, but most of the people tend to portray this as if this is a serious science fiction drama. She tends to portray Talia Winters as if this was a personal drama. A character drama, character study, as opposed to the science fiction side of it. And I don't want to toss any other words out because those words might be construed as an insult. And again, I mean no insult here. It's just a weird thing. That being said, I very much like the way in which they get to her, as they just relate the stories to her about what they have been through and why they have decided to abandon the Corps or flee from the Corps. Garibaldi, I think, actually puts a head on it better than anyone else. Very, very Garibaldi, to cut right to the heart of a matter like that. He mentions how it is basically their fault that the Psi Corps exists. That we were so afraid of them, and we put them in this big old black box called it Psi Corps. And now they're the ones wandering around in the uniforms and giving the orders. Interesting when you think about it, isn't it? Because that's been true in real-life history in many circumstances, which I'm not going to go into. I don't want to get into the politics of that in real-life politics. I do want to relate it to X-Men, though. How many times in the X-Men series, let's be honest, I've said this before, this is not an insult, that there is really one X-Men plot, one X-Men theme, I really should say, and that is the plight of being a mutant. And that is really what's going on with the telepaths here and many members of the Corps. There are plenty of people in Psi Corps who are like Talia Winters, who are decent people, who do not have, the I want to rule the galaxy kind of mindset, who are not out for themselves, who are not trying to be the secret shadowy police, etc., etc. And other things that we'll get to when they come up. You get the impression Psi Corps is basically I don't even want to use a real life equivalent. The horror. Oh, I've got a real life, a fictional equivalent. They're basically the Obsidian Order of Babylon 5, of the Babylon 5 setting of EarthGov, and they come across just as insidious and just as villainous as the Obsidian Order usually did. But one of the more relevant points I want to get to is that exact point, the plight of a telepath. Imagine for a moment, just picture with me, if you will. You wake up one day and you have telepathic powers. You can read other people's minds, to whatever extent. Anywhere from P1 all the way up to P11, okay? Or God forbid, even higher. But for the purpose of this, we'll discuss P1 to P11. You are visited by people in unusual uniforms who are faking being friendly, who speak to you within, at the outside days of you discovering this new power. They find you quick, and they lay it out for you. you can take the sleeper pills. Now, you're probably not even fully aware of what that means, but I'll go ahead and tell you, just for the sake of full transparency. They will dampen the way your brain works. So that will remove your ability to use telepathy and whatnot. It will also lessen the ability of your brain to function properly, because that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to make your brain function less correctly in order to get rid of the telepathic abilities. Make sense? Option 2, you join the Corps. Forever. It'll be your life for the rest of your life. You will work with us, the end, until the day you die. Option 3. Option 3 is usually listed as prison for life. There is actually a fourth option, which is usually not mentioned. I think you can guess what that is. So, what do? Your life has basically just been destroyed. Your old life is gone. Even if you take those sleeper pills, not only are they going to have an increasingly deleterious effect on you for the rest of your life, but much worse to the fact, your friends and family know you're a freak now. People at work, or people around you, or people in the neighborhood. Just like being a mutant, it's hard to avoid that stigma even if you try not to demonstrate it. We've seen in real life how people can be intolerant for any number of reasons. I actually have a theory that people literally just come up with reasons because they just want to be elitist, rather than actually genuinely thinking, oh, you're a blah and therefore you're worse. It's more about, I want to feel better about myself, therefore I put you down. But that's just a theory of mine. The point being, though, people will come up with all sorts of reasons. You're basically painting a giant target on your back if you had frickin' telepathic powers. Or you could join the Corps, which again means your life was destroyed. You may start a new life, you may even like it, but your old life is gone. Any dreams or ambitions you ever had, poof, never happening. You are one of the Corps now. The Corps is mother, and the Corps is father. Or, of course, you can take life in prison. I'm sure that just sounds so appealing to everyone. Yeah. Psychor, I say the plight of the telepaths because the thing that really bothers me most about it is that it's not exactly what you'd call a choice, is it? You didn't one day say, you know, I really want to be a telepath. And you didn't work at it, and you didn't spend days or weeks or months or years working up and doing all this exercise and leveling up your telepathy skill or whatever in order to finally get to the point where, aha, I am a P6 or whatever. I did it. All that hard work has paid off. Then they show up and screw you over. That would actually be slightly more understandable. You know, you woke up one day and, congratulations. You have something that you didn't even know existed before. That is basically just random chance that you were born with. Congrats. Now you're screwed. It's so easy for me to sympathize with the plight of the telepaths, just like it was for the plight of the mutants. They didn't ask for this, to quote Deus Ex. It was forced upon them by circumstances they lacked the ability to control. It kind of makes certain things more insidious, too, but I don't want to talk about that here. I don't actually have much else to say on that. I do have to acknowledge that just as with the mutant situation, the telepath situation does not have an easy answer. There's no just fix, like there sometimes is in fiction, where you can just say, well, let's just do this and make it better. There's no easy answer to the plight of the telepaths, because they are a danger. They are a threat, and they are something that needs to be handled. It's not their fault, but it is still something that has to be dealt with. There's another game that some of my viewers might be more familiar with that actually handles this same issue. Dragon Age. Mages. It's not necessarily your fault, but you are a threat, and you have to be dealt with as if you are a threat. It's a very, in my opinion, and I talked about this during Dragon Age, it is an extremely fine line that needs to be walked. And that requires decent-hearted, well-meaning, and well-reasoned individuals to be able to straddle that line, to treat you as if you're a person, while still being aware of the fact that you are a threat. Trying to hit that balance point. Remember what I said in the last episode, the one previous to that? I trust individuals, not an organization. Let's talk about one last thing. I've been saying tons of actually, let's talk about two more things. I've been praising the hell out of the Babylon 5, and will continue to do so. I mean, we're still getting to the we're still getting good stuff. There is more good stuff to come. I want to give praise to the Ivanova Talia friendship. That Talia actually reached out to Ivanova more than once when they first really started interacting with each other, and it was kind of completely rebuffed. And it was funny because Ivanova even had to acknowledge to herself that Talia wasn't that horrible of a person. It's just she couldn't stand what she represented. And then over time, since then, it has developed to the point where the two actually trust each other, to the point where they're willing to not only vouch for each other, which we saw in previous episodes, but they're willing to discuss things as if they are, in fact, friends. And I actually like that quite a bit. I like that especially because it's so rare that, that kind of a thing will develop. Instead, you'll just be like, it's there. Hang on, let me do that better. There we go. I snap better with my right hand. The only complaint I could levy at that is I wish we'd seen more of that developing over time. However, each window peek we've seen into the two of them's interactions with each other has been a natural development. At no point have I felt it's been forced. The last thing I want to talk about, however, is a complaint. Something that's really been bothering me the last several episodes. Last, 10 or so episodes, actually. It's funny because I had to really analyze why it was bothering me. Now, I'm watching the DVDs, so no commercial breaks, right? So it's really obvious, though, when a commercial break is. First of all, there's the usual 3-act structure, or 5-act structure. But second of all, depending on how you define it, second of all, it's always like, da-da-da, black, and then it comes back, right? Before virtually every commercial break, regardless, there's this weird musical sting. And in almost every case, it's done to, drum up, oh my god. Now, reality time for a moment. This is normal. I don't actually know if this is really normal nowadays. I don't watch enough modern television to dissect something on this level. But for television from the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s, this is absolutely the norm. Because the whole point was trying to ensure that the audience would stay through the commercial break. In other words, this is funny to me, there was a lot of resentment amongst viewers at commercial breaks, and so trying to make sure that they would stay at the television, or at least come back to keep watching the show, they would have these stingers right before the end, right before a commercial break. Musically, of course, as I just emphasized, but usually in terms of story. Sometimes this got a little bit blatant. There's a DS9 example I can't wait to talk about. But for the most part, it's the musical sting, oh my god, and then we'll never make it through, dun 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 dun, or Captain, we need to talk, dun 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 dun. So I started analyzing why it bothered me here, and the reason why is going to make you laugh. It feels cheap here. I don't need to be told to be interested in Babylon 5. I'm already interested in the show. The show is already very high quality for me. And as I've said before, even though it lacks some presentation value, it has tons and tons of meat, tons of core, tons of things that are actually interesting and actually engaging, and make me want to sit through the commercials in order to come back to it. So when I'm already invested, the dun-dun-dun gets distracting after a while, because it feels out of place. Because it is out of place. I've actually talked about this before, and I did a little digging, and apparently I was correct on this. You know how they don't really do the teasers like other shows at the time would either. A teaser, I've talked about this before, the whole point of a teaser being trying to make you interested enough in the episode to keep watching it. And they kind of just sort of artificially choose a moment to do a teaser chop-off in Babylon 5 most of the time, and then they just keep doing the episode as if it was just another commercial break. Because Babylon 5 is constructed to be an overall whole, not teaser, segment, segment, segment. It's designed to be like this. So when you have that teaser, and when you have the dun-dun-dun breaks, it feels like that's the part that doesn't fit. Like, if there were no dun-dun-duns, there were no commercial breaks, and that teaser thing didn't exist, it was just the episode front to back, it would feel much more cohesive, because that's how it feels, at least this is my analysis, and what I've heard from JMS and people who worked on the show, that it was designed to just be 45 minutes of television. You know what I mean? naturally that's not a reality that can happen, and it goes back to the whole television concept and the both benefit and detriment of doing television as a storytelling medium, which I hope to do like an entire discussion on someday. Or maybe I'll just do it as one of these episodes, who knows. But either way, I just wanted to talk about that because this episode, it got really bad. There were several times where I'm like, I'm really engaged. We've got Bester, we've got the Psychops, we've got lots of character growth for most of the characters involved, and I'm really engaged, and all of a sudden, dun dun dun! It was like whiplash. It pulled me out of the episode. I'm like, ugh. And then, of course, because there is no commercial break, I don't even have that moment to recover. It just goes right back into the episode, because, DVD, so it's like, ah. Anyway, small complaint, but God, just stop doing that. I'll see you next time, guys.